All right. Welcome all, and thank you for being here. Raising Anchor 2026. This particular session has been months in the making, and I am super excited to bring forward the great Keri Fisher from Ireland and Studio 3. Before we get into our very anticipated session, let me tell you a little bit about why we're here. Hope Reform is a nonprofit and a registered 501c3 as a charity in the state of Washington. We are an accreditation and certification agency serving organizations that provide crisis services, technical assistance, certification, and accreditation in those crisis services are things that are in sore need of development, particularly here in the West, when it comes to standards. And thank goodness there are leaders in these organizations who are really striving to deliver the highest quality crisis services that they possibly can, that embodies the mission, vision, and values of very often their parent organization. And the complexion of crisis services is rapidly changing throughout the United States. Hope Reform has stepped into the gap to offer what we feel is among the most needed services to ensure that leadership, organizational values, policies, and the comportment to all of those by the organization's people are strong and solid. Our board of directors consists of global experts in adult corrections, juvenile justice, psychiatric care and services, psychiatric nursing, organizational leadership, and social psychology, among a few. The board is very interested in supporting agencies, particularly small ones, that might not have the resources to pursue certification with those services. Your donations to Hope Reform helps that work. And this year, our virtual conference does exist so that we can make the work of Hope Reform visible to the public. And so you have an opportunity to consider donating. In the links in the comments of this video, you'll see ways for you to express support if you'd like to do that. And we don't associate, we chose this year to make all of our content completely free of charge to the public. Your donation is optional. There's no paywall. And with that, this particular session has been months in the making. This person that you're about to meet, I saw on Instagram for the first time, and she had me by the throat with her affect, her command of the ideas, her presentation. She had me totally sucked in. Her colleague and the director of Studio 3, Andy McDonald, being a friend of mine, I immediately reached out to him and said, "Who is this woman? Where did you find her?" And he was very proud about that. He couldn't have been more thrilled to say, "We found Keri in Ireland as a practitioner, and she's just one of our best champions." So as I've been trying to bring forward the relevance, the meaningfulness of the low arousal approach, it is impossible to do that, in my view, without Keri Fisher. So with that, Keri, please accept our gratitude for coming to our Raising Anchor virtual conference this year and being willing to talk about supporting the workforce. We're very grateful to you.
Thank you very much, Andy. It is an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be here. Thank you for that very flattering introduction. I really appreciate it. I really do. It's lovely to be here. So really looking forward to kind of getting into what we're going to discuss and what we're going to talk about today. And I know kind of Andy has already set the precedent a little bit. So hopefully I can keep everybody as engaged perhaps as he did.
I'm sure you will. Of that, I have no doubt. And we've also had Gareth on, and Rob Wiskins will be coming up in the near future. So we're really thrilled that Studio 3 has just been so willing to be involved in our conference this year. Keri, I think a great place to start might be to talk a little bit about how you came into, like a little bit like your Marvel origin story, how you came into this role that you're in where you're providing very complex care to people with some very complex needs, and you're using a particular approach that resonates with you to the extent that you are now an exponent of this method, the low arousal method. Maybe you can just kind of walk us into how you got here and what you're doing now.
Absolutely. So yeah, like just a few minutes ago, Andy, we were kind of getting into that little bit of a conversation, and it is surprising because normally as professionals, we are kind of in the moment. We're really focused about what we're doing. And often we don't really take time to reflect where I am. Am I here for a particular reason? What is my purpose? What is my role in life? And sometimes we can get really stuck where we are, and really stuck in that kind of, Monday and day to day, have to go to work. This is what I do. Okay. Now, particularly for care staff, particularly for health professionals, it does take a particular type of person, I do believe, to work with individuals and support individuals and walk with individuals through their experience of life itself.
Yeah.
And from a very young age, like hundreds and thousands of other individuals out there, strongly believed that I wanted to help people. I didn't just want to be kind of trudging along just because I had to work to survive. I was very fortunate enough to, by chance, come across the very first organization, the organization that gave me the opportunity to spread my wings and experience and support work for vulnerable adults at the fresh young age of 21, straight out of university, hadn't got a clue about life itself, no experience whatsoever outside the professor's kind of stage, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. What I did believe, though, and firmly believe, that I was in and kind of on the trajectory where I wanted to be within my career.
Yep.
And this was the best place to start for me, particularly as a support worker, because as I now know, 15 years later, the voices that matter the most are the boots on the ground.
Yep.
Okay, the people who are working and supporting day in, day out, whether that is you are a family member and you're supporting a loved one, whether that is you are a residential worker, a support staff in a hospital setting. We are surrounded by these networks of people, and we need support from all aspects. So I was very fortunate enough, as I said, 15 years ago, to be introduced to Studio 3 and low arousal approach. And I really think I moved to Studio 3 about 5-6 years ago, and I don't think I was ready before then. And a lot of that kind of reasoning behind why I say that is because I was still in this living experience of, I haven't met every single person with a particular support need that I have tackled. I still haven't, which is fine, because, we're never expertise until, we get to that day far in the future, hopefully, when we're lying and thinking about our life and what we've done. But I wasn't ready. And I was still working as a manager in a support service, supporting vulnerable adults and loving my job. And then finally, one of my colleagues was in contact with Andy McDonald. And she said to me, I think there's an opportunity in Studio 3, and I think you'll really enjoy the move. I was so apprehensive because, like anybody, was a little bit, what's going to happen? I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what the change was going to do for me in my career.
Sure.
And I made the move, and it was the best thing that I've ever done, because I now really am in a place where I'm supporting families. I'm still able to journey through the country, meet different people, and I'm still living that experience every day. So hopefully I have enough knowledge and experience behind me to know a little bit of what I'm talking about today.
Yeah. Keri, one of the observations I'm making in your opening salvo, as a provider, it's not unusual to hear providers talk about their history and imbue or infuse into that presentation clinical specialty terms. You didn't do any of that. You describe people with complex needs or people who are vulnerable, in terms of experience and walking with them and supporting them. And there's a beauty to that that's absent very often in the Western care and services settings. We can describe people as their diagnostic criteria. We can dehumanize. And I don't think people start that way in their careers. I think they start with a genuine desire very often to be of service, to carry out their duties in a selfless way. And then the grind of this work, which very often can show up in the presentation of stress by a person served, or the presentation of discontrol. The workforce member may not be properly prepared for that. There's some emotional imprinting, and then they're carrying that around, and it's expressing itself through their interactions with others. That beautiful term you use to describe that movement, which I really want to give you a platform to talk about. We're going to systems today that are just in a lot of trouble. The workforce does not want to come to work, but they have to come to work. The quality of services are very, very concerning because let's say, wellness of the workforce is so compromised, and the way that they carry out their services can be insensitive, dismissive, in some cases, straight inappropriate. And I would say that's more oriented toward the correctional settings, by the way, than the human services or support services. But we're in a number of those places, and confinement's occurring all the time. So I think you have something very valuable to speak to the workforce members here today, because you're showing up in a very modeling kind of way. The way you're showing up to this talk, and what you're naturally presenting is, I think, a picture of an ideal kind of way to be with it. So, we'd love to hear more.
On that note, and that's a really good place, I guess, to start, Andy. And what does the ideal actually look like?
Yeah.
Because it is different for everybody, but actually it is the kind of assumption that we have of what ideal actually is, and where we sit in terms of our own behavior, our own response in a day-to-day setting, not just, as I say, with those that we support, but also our colleagues, those people that we share space with in our family homes, all of that. And I think the biggest maybe the biggest obstacle, maybe the biggest barrier sometimes for that change in mindset is how we sit, and are we allowing ourselves, or are we able to sit in that space of discomfort while we are reflecting?
Yes. Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
A lot of the time, as you said, there's a lot of pathologizing around human behavior. God. Especially in times when there doesn't need to be. So I guess when, there's a lot of things I do that maybe my husband would say, Keri, I think maybe you need a support plan. And I don't disagree with them in times of distress, but okay, I'm not pathologized. My quirks and my weirdness, it's not something to be kind of separated and kind of squished out of me. It's just part of who I am. It's the same with everybody. So I think as we go through, I'm going to set the kind of standard today, folks, particularly for this little kind of informal chat about the differences in where we navigate to, or what kind of trajectory we need to diverge, I guess, to. And the first thing that I always kind of be mindful of is that you do not need to agree with everything that I say.
Oh, what a lovely opener. Lovely. Yes.
In terms of the things that I'm kind of bringing up, your curiosity is enough. And that's all I ask for. It's to be open-minded, and as I say, give a little bit of time to yourself to sit in that discomforting zone and just be mindful of what comes up.
Okay. Yeah, you have a slide deck you'd like to go to, Keri?
I am going to go ahead. So can everybody,
it's on the stage. Yep. It's on the stage.
On the stage. Okay. So Today, we're going to talk about then assumptions, or the assumptions that we often have about behavior. And before I guess we really get into that, okay, I'm going to introduce a little bit of a matrix. I'm not going to do a very clinical talk, okay, but I do want to kind of get round to why we are so focused sometimes on behavior. And as I'm sure my colleague, when you have that chat with him, Rob, when he talks about behavior, and when we talk about, we go into services and normally we're met with, brilliant, you're here to sort out the challenging behavior. And you're here to sort out him or her because the behavior has got out of hand. What do we mean by behavior? And we really want to strip this down so simplistically in terms of how we move, because movement itself is the root of what we call behavior. Okay, yeah. You're either doing what is expected in context, so you are displaying typical behavior, or you're either doing too much or too little of something that you should in context. But then other questions arise from that. Who sets the context? What's normal? What's typical? What's different? Okay, so we make an awful lot of assumptions, and sometimes very, very quickly, especially if we are unsure about a particular behavior. We tend to fear it because we may not have control over it at the time. We may not know what the potential outcome is going to be. Yeah. So what I'm going to really start off with to set the precedent for the rest of today's little chat is this little matrix. And the matrix is called the aware and in control matrix, but this helps us think about what we believe we're in control of versus what we actually are. Okay, so you talked a little bit with Andy on the other chats, particularly around stress. And when we are really stressed, things that we perceive as a threat, that adrenaline release in the body in that moment, in that stressful moment, it can seriously distort what we are actually assuming about a particular behavior at the time, especially if our fight or flight system is involved.
I love that you use the word distort, Keri. That's brilliant use of that word. It does distort.
Yeah, a little bit different, just looks a little bit out of the ordinary. And when our arousal rises, our sense of choice and control really narrows in. And the real skill that we often miss out on is recognizing the early signs of movement and acting in our support before the control is lost completely. Okay, so when we're thinking about, really difficult situations, perhaps, and I'm not just talking here about the people we support, in conflict and confrontation with families, with friends, with colleagues, whoever it might be, the question to ask is, what kind of quadrants does this behavior occupy for this person at the moment? Not he or she is doing that with purposeful intent. That's just our assumption. Okay. Or a fun way to think about it, as I like to think about it, is premature plot twists in certain situations, right? So here's how it's kind of usually mapped. We think about kind of quadrant one, and that is spaces and places where we are fully aware and in control, okay? And this is, we talked about ideals, the ideal, space where we feel we sit in a different context. And this is the ideal space where we all wish to be in and where we assume we are at any given time. So that might be performing tasks. I'm now speaking with you today. So this is public speaking. I'm aware, I'm in control of what I have to do. And that's great. This is really effective, but it leads to fatigue. If our conscious body, our brains, our sensory system, if we are always aware and in control, we can tire very, very quickly. Yeah.
Agreed.
So we always think, or we always have the assumption that we are aware of what's happening and we have access to choice. Yeah. And this is okay. So in this little kind of area, when we're calm, relaxed, and happy, this is the space when our thinking brain is online. We can pause, we can reflect, we can respond rather than just react. And before we go any further, this is where low arousal approaches are designed to keep us for as long as possible. Okay,
Yes.
so this is really where we're aiming for. Yeah. Now, if we move on to look at situations where we're unaware, but still have a little bit of control. Now, technically, we still have control, but we might not realize how our behavior is actually affecting the situation. Okay, so if we think about everyday actions that we do or activities, so we would put driving here. Yeah. Have you ever got to work and parked the car and then realized, oh my goodness, I don't even remember driving down the highway and suddenly I'm here?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that autopilot. Yeah. And this is actually where we're most comfortable. Now, stress starts to narrow our awareness before it removes all control. And that's kind of a really important little factor to take into consideration. So this might be, if we think about us as supporters, this might be standing too close to someone we support without noticing and suddenly getting an elbow in the ribs and thinking, oh, okay, and maybe not stand too close to them next time. It might be speaking more quickly or raising the volume of our voice without really noticing the shift in our stress. It might be using authority-based language out of habit. I've told you that already. I'm not repeating myself.
Keri, I'm just going to tell you, I'm so excited that you're talking about this. So much parenting occurs in this quadrant.
Yes.
I mean, myself included, like, put the controller down, go do your homework, you know? So like, I could totally see how, if one is not in the moment, truly in the moment, there can be exactly the phenomena you've described. There's there's a lack of awareness about what's happening to me and how it shows up in these habituated interactions. Parenting is like lives there, you know.
Yeah, and it's that autopilot.
Yeah.
It's that autopilot of repetitive movement, the things that we normally do day to day. Now, the tricky part here is that on occasion, our nonverbal conversation or nonverbal communication does not match with our spoken language. So we're saying, yeah, everything's absolutely fine. I'm fine. What's wrong with you? Yeah, everything's grand. And we're frowning, or I'm sighing, or my arms are crossing. And that is a real kind of disruption to the person that I'm communicating with, because it's a mixed signal. They're unsure. You're telling me you're fine. I think we can all understand the situation where we've all said, I'm fine, but it's not really the case. Yeah. Our body language doesn't match that. Now, in our area that we are unaware but in control, this is, as you said, Andy, where many escalations begin. Not through our intent. We're not intending to escalate, but it's through our unconscious signal. Okay. And those being our stress hormones, but also the physical aspect, the physical effect that stress has on the body. So our interoceptive self, okay, this is less typical, but can occur with those, as you said, highly habitual or kind of automatic behaviors, actions that really happen on autopilot. Yeah. So if we kind of move down, we're thinking about times now where perhaps we're aware, but we're not in control. And this is a really uncomfortable place to be. Because this is attempting a task with maximum concentration, but really low proficiency. Yeah. And it's really typical, I guess, of the learning phase. So I'll bring back driving in here. So learning to drive. Yeah. We're aware, but we are not fully in control of that car. Okay. That's why the driving instructor has his own pedals. So if you make a little bit of a mistake, he's got your back. He's got you covered. He is your support person. Okay. It might be our children or the people that we might be supporting. They want to learn a new skill, or they want to join a particular social group. They are fully aware, but they are not in control. They don't perhaps know what to expect, or if they go into a certain situation and something they haven't expected happens, what now? Okay. That's
Keri,
that element of kind of surprise. Yeah.
I love the way you're doing this. I'm sorry if I have to keep
You're okay. It's
exploding
fine.
with that. I love the way you're doing this. I'm thinking right now about so many people in my professional career and in my life that credit their discomfort. They will credit like external locus of control. If things don't improve around here very quick, I'm going to. In other words, someone is already aware, like you said, like it shows in the grid here, like when a certain threshold is met, I am not going to be able to control myself.
Yeah. And I guess as we go through, we'll be thinking about that. We'll be doing our own internal reflections of previous, situations that we've had. And the phrase that often comes to mind in regards to kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again, insanity is thinking that we can continue to do the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So, we need to be adding context. Okay. And not just the context of the environment, the context where the person's sitting in the moment. And when we get to this kind of stage of we're aware, but we're not in control, this is the stage where we also really know what we should do, but stress has hijacked our nervous system. Okay. So let's add a little bit of context. Yeah.
Okay.
Those situations where in the heat of the moment, in that heated debate, as my husband likes to call them, he doesn't like to call them arguments. He likes to call them heated debates. Right. And in those moments of heated debates, knowing that I should really stay calm because there's a part of me disagreeing with what perhaps my husband says or something like that, but I snap. And inside going, I can't believe I just said that out loud. I can't believe I said that in that moment.
Right.
It might be wanting to step away from a particular situation that makes you feel really uncomfortable, but actually you feel very stuck in the moment.
Yes.
Or it could be, it's a very similar situation last night with my daughter, feeling in the moment my voice change despite my best intentions during my conversation. Where I'm hearing attitude, but like my low arousal self is very much like, okay, she could have had a hard day, but wait, what did she just call me?
Yeah.
Like that is a lot. Okay. Right. And I think at this point, willpower isn't enough. Okay.
That's right. I couldn't agree more.
Right. And I think that this is also where, as supporters, we can step in with physiological regulation.
Yep.
And this is where we talk about within low arousal approach, we slow ourselves down, we take a breath, we breathe again in that high intense moment, we give space, we reduce demands, all of those sorts of things. That becomes really essential in support. Okay. So the last quadrant, we have quadrant number 4.
Yeah.
And this is our space where we're unaware and we're not in control. This is full survival mode. Okay.
Yeah.
Our thinking brain is offline. Yeah. And our behavior, our movement in this particular phase, it's reactive. It's not intentional. Okay. Now, some examples of maybe our own support in the past, it might be, I'll use myself again as an example. It might be me as a parent shouting at one of my children or issuing threats. Right, that's a week off electronics. Do you want to make it 2? In that moment, yeah. It could have been, okay, and a more serious note, it could have been you have been in a situation in your work employment and it could have been a physical intervention without reflection, yeah, going into that moment. And a lot of the time, particularly within services, using restraint and restrictive practice, it stems from not just the fear of the escalated behavior, it's the fear of lack of control, and it's the need in that moment for supporters to regain control. How best to do that than completely restrict someone's movement. Yeah, so a lot of that stems not because the person needs restrained or restricted at all,
but in to establish personal control.
To establish control, but that is an element of our safety. That's our comfort. Right. Now I have control. Now I can take a breath. Okay, so
Keri, this is so brilliant, so brilliant, so
a
brilliant.
lot of that stems there. So in this little kind of box, this is where the greatest risk, of course, sits. Yes, to the person in distress, to staff, to supporters legally, but most importantly, to the relationship that we have with the person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we think about, behavior, and we talk about assumptions that we have. And importantly, people do not enter this quadrant because they're bad. They enter the quadrant, they enter this state of unawareness and a lack of control because their arousal has gone too high. Never have I woke up during the day going, do you know what? I'm going to be a right plonker today.
Yeah.
And I'm going to cause absolute mayhem because it feels great. We've all experienced a state of high arousal. It doesn't feel good. Yeah. So how does this all link to that kind of fight, flight, stress response? Well, we think about the fight or flight. It doesn't remove responsibility, but it does reduce capacity. And I think that's the real big thing here, particularly around the intention toward another human being.
Oh, Keri, let me jump in, please. This is so important, this moment. There are people who separate the responsibility from the experience, and instead they will justify that their experience is the proper is an un it, as I was let me reorganize my words here.
You're okay.
That I am justified in my inappropriate response because of my experience.
Yeah.
And the responsibility is lost. Like, I am justified. I've witnessed that happen with psychiatrists who were afraid, and they were being very let's say directive and untherapeutic to a person receiving psychiatric services, and we're suggesting to the doctor, hey, how about you have a phone call? Let us take over here. And then the doctor would say, I don't have a phone call. And like they're entitled to their right to be non-therapeutic because their experience is so animated.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are the obstacles that we come across every day working with people and their lived experience. Absolutely. And it comes down to this state of arousal and how comfortable you are, or even how you cope with that intrinsically, internally, rather than how you express that to the people that you share space with. Absolutely. And we know that the higher the arousal, the fewer behavioral options we can actually access. So when we think about why do we use low arousal, why is it necessary? Low arousal practice itself, it's about managing our stress first, not just the behavior in front of us. Yeah.
Perfect.
So we're kind of thinking then, going on to that, thinking that low arousal means that we are choosing our presence in that situation over pressure. Okay. And that might be pressure to fix. That might be pressure as in the expectation we have on ourselves. It could be any amounts of pressure. So we focus first on helping that person feel safe, feel understood. And we're going to talk about kind of validation and invalidation today as well, and regulated before we even put that expectation on a person to change a particular behavior in any way.
Lovely.
So change itself, we know that it will follow safety, right? Not the other way around. Okay. So let's kind of carry on.
Yeah.
In regards to kind of movement, and I did want to talk about movement today for a number of reasons, but we often find, Andy, that, in this consumer world that we live in, if we have a complicated issue, we have to outsource. We have to get a process for something. We have to get a rule book. We need 10 steps before we can actively support somebody really well. Or we need to engage this person in a 12-week program and then they're fixed, right? This particular session, we're not going to be talking about more strategies that we're going to add to your workload.
I love it. Yeah.
Right? It's about noticing what's already happening, but not just in the environment. We're talking about actually within our body. And movement itself, it's really deeply connected to how the brain works. And when our movement feels hard, when it feels unpredictable, when it feels effortful, our thinking and communication reduce. And this is especially important for people who do not have the luxury of verbal communication.
That's right.
Because distress is often expressed through movement or behavior. So kind of thinking on that level or getting a little bit deeper, movement, memory, perception, and emotion, they are not separate systems. We talk about it as they are separate systems, but they are so tightly connected.
You're so right.
And when we kind of give that expectation to move our bodies, or we're giving demands or requests to the children or those that we support, and we expect them to suddenly get up and follow us or get up and finish a task or demand, that can be quite difficult. And when movement feels difficult, when it feels unpredictable, or even when it's unsafe, the brain will shift its focus away from learning and toward, I need to protect my body.
Yes.
And that's not a choice. And there is where we need to reframe this assumption. This is a nervous system response. So when we kind of see difficulty with even ourselves and those that we support, difficulty remembering sequences, maybe misjudging force or the distance between ourselves and something else, we often are seeing signs that the body is under stress. And at this point, expecting learning, expecting compliance, that's a big one I hear a lot.
Yeah, unreasonable.
Or even,
completely unreasonable.
Yeah, or even communication becomes really unrealistic. So that's why we say regulation must come before expectation. Okay.
Regulation before expectation.
Yes.
That's another Keri Fisher takeaway. Regulation before expectation. I love it. Okay.
I haven't copyrighted that yet. Don't claim it off me yet.
I'm gonna put it in the description when we load this to social media. Regulation before expectation. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we think about behavior and our movement differences, they do reflect neurological processing. And we all, we might be working with individuals who have differences in their neural pathways. We work with individuals who have sensory processing differences. When we kind of reframe behavior as communication, our responses become calmer, okay, and more effective. And I've put a few little kind of statements on the screen before we move on. And I'm talking about things like when we assume it's laziness. Is it really laziness, or is it more about cognitive load? Is it more about processing? It's not refusal. We have to think about how demanding on that person's system is it to physically do the task that you're asking. It's not poor behavior. What you assume is poor behavior, we're thinking about regulation and dysregulation.
Yeah.
So thinking about how that really impacts our body movements on a day-to-day level, I work an awful lot and support an awful lot of families. And now, because of that work, at the minute, my training and support trajectory has sent me off into the education system. I could not be happier with that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so excited about that because there is so many times and moments within education that we misjudge or we misunderstand. And again, it comes from the expectations educators put on themselves. We have to be with that child and we have to curriculum to teach for this so many hours. How am I supposed to also support a child who's acting in this way or that? So we're really kind of tying this together in regards to our finer motor sequencings, and initiation difficulties are often misunderstood. That is, you're talking about difficulties starting something or stopping something. Same with ourselves. And how many procrastinators are going to be listening to this today? We'll put that off until tomorrow. Or anybody who uses an alarm and hits the snooze button 3 or 4 times. That's a difficulty starting. I can't
Sure.
even initiate my body to get out of bed in the morning without an alarm. So we're thinking about this in a really, human form. Okay. And from the outside, that outsider perspective, that can look like someone ignoring instruction, refusing to do something, or just being stuck, just sitting there. But internally, again, we're talking about the nervous system. It's not oppositional. Okay. So this is kind of often an initiation difficulty. And that initiation, as I said, is the ability to actually begin a movement or an action. For some neurodivergent people, initiation is one of the hardest parts of the task, even when they understand exactly what is being asked. And initiation will often take time, often much, much more time than we are comfortable with. And we come back to this space of, are we okay with feeling uncomfortable? What makes us more uncomfortable in times of support? And you talked, Andy, there, about getting into your first, myself getting in my first job, and we come into support work and health and care settings with loads of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And that was me. I was coming out of university into my support role. First job, I was ready to go, ready to do things. I was so enthusiastic. And my first few months of support work, I was explaining to my boss earlier on, for me, it was like hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
Why? Because I actually came into a service where I needed to slow down. I needed to wait. I was initially, after having no experience whatsoever working with individuals that needed additional support, I was working and supporting two gentlemen who were non-speaking. And that for me was a real eye-opener. And that for me, I guess, was the first part in my career where I thought, oh, okay, this is what it feels like to be uncomfortable. This is what it feels like to sit in somebody else's presence and not be able to have a direct conversation using my learnt language. I have to learn somebody else's language. And that was the really scary part for me. And when we do that, we really start to get into that vibe with another person where we can share space. We all have those people where we can share space with them and we don't have to speak. We're comfortable in their presence, and that's okay. So in terms of supporting individuals, when we rush, and I'm not saying enthusiasm is bad, it is not, but when we rush into support, when we're on a time limit, we have 10 more minutes to complete this task, we're starting to maybe repeat instructions. Maybe those moments when we step in too quickly, we accidentally increase cognitive load. We accidentally add social pressure, or we accidentally communicate urgency.
Right.
And this can shut down initiation completely.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And what I'm thinking as I'm listening to you is, because I know what that zeal and enthusiasm feels like. That's got nothing to do with the person served. That's all about me, all of it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to carry out whatever vision that I have about that I should be doing, while, as you pointed out in the grid, while I'm not really aware of that. My experience is one thing, but I'm not aware of it. And it's coming into contact with other people in a non-salutary way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when we think about that, particularly as maybe supporters, as a workforce, we're constantly on the go. We have higher objectives coming down kind of, through the hierarchy of our organizations.
Sure.
And those individuals will have objectives. And when they eventually hit the workforce, it's almost like, right, these are the things that I need to do. And if I don't get them done, what's going to happen? Am I bad at my job? Am I not able to do this properly? There's all of those other intrinsic factors going on. So in terms of supporting a person, how they need support, waiting or slowing down is not doing nothing. The waiting actually becomes the support. And that just brings us back to that question: how comfortable are we with waiting? How comfortable are we with actually slowing down? Now, when we talk about kind of why even, children or some adults and ourselves sometimes, why moving between things is actually harder and often more difficult than the thing itself. This is a transition. We know, we're very aware about transitions, and we move from place to place and spend our days in different environments with different people and different things. And transitions can also stack multiple demands at once. Now, they often look very simple to us, but for many neurodivergent individuals, they place a very high demand on the nervous system. Okay. And what we actually try and navigate toward is thinking the transition itself is going to also be a task. Not what comes next, but the moving between becomes the work for that person who really struggles with moving in general. So when we talk about supporting a person, we actually really talk about giving back control. And how do we do that? Well, we make things predictable, particularly for individuals who have sensory processing differences or different neurological pathways.
Yeah.
We repeat things. We put things in predictable routines, the same order, same language, same clues.
Yes.
We're flexible.
Gareth talked about the predictive brain at length. So I love hearing the continuity here, Keri.
Yeah,
Please
absolutely.
continue. Yeah.
We're flexible. We talk about flexibility quite a lot, allowing longer maybe than needs, feels necessary. We talk about, even in difficult transitions, transitional objects, holding things, carrying things, or moving something meaningful. And on that note, actually, I'll share with you, I was doing a little bit of support work for, I'm sure they won't mind me sharing their name. They're called Liquid Therapy. And they do water activities for individuals that need additional support. And one particular young man was really struggling transitioning from the water to the changing area. And there was always kind of a meltdown in place. Every time he was asked to get out of the water, really, really struggled with that. And we talked about how we can kind of support his sensory system on that level and give him something else to find that balance within his body. And it came up that actually what really would help would be carrying little buckets of water from the water in the beach, up the beach to the changing bay and back down. And that's something that sounds really silly, but actually it's balancing his proprioceptive self. And it's giving him something meaningful to do while he's going up. Once he gets to the changing area, he sloshes the water over his feet,
right,
and all of them come off. So it's thinking about how we sometimes have to adapt our support dependent on the need of the person, of course, we are supporting. And a lot of that, where do we find any of this information? From the relationships that we have with people. Yeah. Now, when we kind of talk about motor accommodations in general are quite small, often unconscious ways of, adapting to our movement to cope with that environment. And it might be individuals leaning or swinging, maybe rocking on furniture. It might be using furniture for balance. Or even in my son's case, and some of my middle one and my much younger child, it could be sitting differently in ways that you look unusual. Exhibit A. This is a very normal thing in our household.
Exhibit A.
I thought I'd just take a picture of it because that's normal to me. It might not be normal to anybody else, but hey, that's what it is. Yeah. And that's very comfortable. Now, when we try and remove these accommodations, even with good intentions, we often remove the person's ability to cope. And allowing accommodations often prevents escalation because these are self-regulatory strategies. If they are safe, we allow them. I worked with a young boy who, as the story transpired, there was a lot of different movements that this particular child was engaging in. And of course, a lot of risky behaviors as well, thinking about self-injury and things like that. And one thing that I noticed upon kind of first number of observation shifts was he had a tendency to put his hands up his sleeves, and he would roll his arms inside his sleeves.
Okay.
And he would do this for quite a while. And obviously, as he did it, the material around his arms started to get wider and wider. Now, that was okay in the home. Mum and dad were absolutely fine with that. And this was a behavior that I had seen, but I didn't think any more of it until I went into his day service, where they were having lots of behaviors of distress and namingly self-injurious behavior. And so upon observation on this one particular day, the child did this very normal behavior as he does at home. And as soon as he put his arms inside his sleeves, the staff, good intentioned, but unknowingly said, "Oh, Jonathan, take your arms out of your sleeves. You're going to stretch your sleeves." And as soon as they kind of put pressure, taking his arm away, immediately the self-injury began.
Oh, yeah.
And we're removing something that is accommodating that child at the time. It acts as a form of regulation. So it's thinking about how the differences in movement actually matter most to those that we support. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a slogan on the previous slide. The transition is the task.
Yes.
That even applies here. This is someone's engaging in a transitional activity to manage themselves, and how often we can disrupt that just from not knowing. Just from the not knowing.
Yeah. And talking about pathologizing, and the lack of we do of ourselves. My husband would tell me differences about the way I move when I'm trying to move from one space to another. For example, he said to me last week, every time we try to leave the house, you do something that doesn't make sense to me. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, every time we try to leave, I look back a few minutes later and you're like picking up rubbish that was on the floor for the past 2 days and you decide to put it in the bin. I have an innate habitual behavior to tidy up every time I leave a room.
Yes.
Why do I do it? I've no idea. And I didn't notice that in myself, but he noticed that from me.
Amazing.
From that outsider's perspective. Yeah. So we all do things slightly differently. We have our own little quirks.
Yep.
When it comes to generalizing things, and we learn things as we are, toddlers, starting to walk very early on, before maybe 9 or 10, then we're into kind of pubescent years, and we learn how to do things in different environments. And not all the time do the skills that we learn are as easily transferred as we might assume. And when we say context matters, we're not just talking about context in the environment. Yes, of course we are, but we're also talking about what it is like for that person. And what we mean is, just because someone can do a movement in one place or a task in one place or under one set of conditions, does not mean that their nervous system can automatically do it somewhere else. And motor skills are not just stored as instructions in the brain. Okay, they are tied to the environment. So what is the environment like today? What's the noise like? What's the layout like? It's tied to the people in that space. How are they presenting? Because if I'm presenting really distressed or agitated, and I'm expecting someone in my presence to do the same thing as they did 2 days ago when I was calm, chilled, relaxed, I'm not going to get the same outcome. They're not going to feel safe in my space. It's also kind of tied to, our motor skills are tied to our emotional states. And of course, the sensory load, how we're actually feeling on that sensory level, and how safe the body feels in that moment. So a child, for example, might, manage stairs, for example, in one building, but then freeze when they come to another set of steps. Yeah. An adult might use cutlery differently or very confidently at home, but struggle when they go into a restaurant.
Right.
Student in school might write really well at a desk, but when they come down to talk about the world and they have to sit on the carpet and everybody's in a circle, they might not really know how to do that very effectively in that space. And the reassumption here, or the assumption that we have, is that the child is inconsistent, they're being defiant, they're just being awkward. It's not inconsistency, okay? It's not defiance, or they know how to, and if they really wanted to, they do. It's really about the difficulty transferring that motor skill. And generalization is not a given. It's a nervous system dependent response. So in low arousal approach itself, we don't push for that, as I said, generalization. We support it gently, or we accept that it might not happen today, and that's okay. It's all about that flexibility.
Keri, I got to jump in. I'm feeling so encouraged by this example of a point you gave about 20, 25 minutes ago. These systems are not independent of one another. They are integrated. One affects the other. And we, in our description of these activities, whether they're cognitive, whether they're psychomotor, whether they're sensory, we discuss them in isolation because it's easier for us to discuss them in isolation. It's not because they function independently of one another.
Yeah.
And so often I think that is missed. And you're really preaching a very holistic approach to the relationship that these systems have with one another. And we need to be aware of that minimally.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bare minimum, and again, I'm not asking, and I think sometimes this is where we get so overwhelmed because, we live in a technological age where there is so much information, and it's like, well, what do I believe and where do I go? And, what do I do? Because this person says this and this person says something else. I'm not asking that. I'm asking to look first at ourselves.
Right.
And look within. And, it's not about blame. It's not about shame. It's about how can I be the best person and the best version of myself, especially for the person perhaps that I love unconditionally. Because if I was in this state, or if I was really struggling, who would I want to show up?
Right.
And would those people show up for me? And it's having a little bit of compassion, a little bit of a deeper understanding of why sometimes it's not just what we think, because what we think is very much based on our own experience, and we are projecting that onto somebody else.
Yes. I love the distinction here in these bullet points. These responses are often misread as refusing to join in, being oppositional, someone's lacking confidence. Got nothing to do with that. Nothing
to do with that.
So
nothing
brilliant.
to do with that. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? For some people, movement is a really, really helpful regulation tool. For others, it's overwhelming. And our role is really to notice the difference and respond accordingly. And particularly in a world where there is so much shadow and there's so much negativity, our job is, as a safe adult, to create those conditions for regulation, not demand it. We have no right to demand regulation of someone that we have no idea what their experience of this world has been. So regulation is the prerequisite for communication, for learning. And our language can either reduce or increase arousal.
You know, I heard of a slogan a long time ago, Keri. Maybe you heard of it. It's called regulation before expectation.
Well, there was a very wise woman that said that, Andy, and you need to go back and get her name.
So brilliant. Yes. Please continue. Let me get out of your way. Please continue.
Yeah, you're okay. So, and actually, Andy mentioned something, my Andy McDonald mentioned something when he was on with you about this permission, and the permission sometimes that, we need to drop that expectation of how we're feeling in the moment. And we also, as safe adults, need to sometimes be verbalizing that permission for other people in our world and other people in our care. We're giving that kind of neutral, permissive language, and it supports autonomy, it supports dignity, and that's really what we want to do. I have a few little case examples. Okay, I think I've only maybe brought up two, but really to kind of drive this home for individuals. It might be that we are supporting a non-speaking child and they become really distressed during tidy up, or even really distressed at you giving the verbal demand of, okay, boys and girls, let's tidy up. What can this look like? What do we assume? The child's refusing to tidy up. The child is ignoring instructions. The child is being ignorant or rude. Now, just to note, the words that I've just used, they're very emotionally weighted terms.
Yeah.
Because we are adding the intention. Yeah. What's really happening, tidy up involves stopping an activity that the child possibly is really, really enthused by, planning multiple movements in their body, organizing their movements, coping with the change in environment, so maybe the noise, and losing access to something that perhaps they were using as regulation. And they lose those things all at once. So low arousal response to that, we really think about that child's movement or individual's movement, and we maybe offer a single heavy item to carry. Yeah, it might be a box. I get my little boy to help me, particularly on a Sunday afternoon, with the shopping bags out of the car. And I always leave 2 in the car, because for us, what works for our home on a particular Sunday, my son also struggles with transitions, but that is a natural transition. Mum coming home means it's the stop of something and the start of something else. So the best way that I tackle that is I call him and I say, where's my strong boy? Can you come and help mummy? You're very, very caring. You want to help me, and that's great. I have big, heavy bags. Could you please help me? And it really helps him transition into another environment. And that's something really simple. That's something we do every day.
But think how brilliant that is, though, Keri. It's the transition is the task. To your point, it is the task. It's not the task. Lifting the bags is not the thing. The transition to lifting the bags is the thing.
Yeah. And when we support the body first, okay, it really comes down to stress, the physiological signs of stress, how that feels, how that's experienced in the body. When we are starting to support the body first, the behavior reduces without confrontation. The person we are supporting is not being difficult. Their nervous system is overwhelmed. And once we can get that under control, we've got it. It's more easy to manage and support. We think about a particular individual, perhaps, who frequently leaves class within the school setting, paces up and down the corridors, and that child is often described as avoiding classwork or avoiding doing anything. He's refusing work. He's disengaging. Again, we can think of numerous other negative variables attached to this, poor motivation, all of these things. What's really happening? Well, he's been expected to sit for an extended period of time when his body and his brain are not equipped for that. All of those things refine fine motor skills. So he has to really concentrate on that part of the brain and that part of the body where we have to be aware and in control. So we're writing for long periods of time. His cognitive load is increasing. And because there's a lot going on in here, it's looping round and round, he's found it really difficult to cope with that stress. So what low arousal speaks to is giving the child permission to stand up, giving the child permission to take a movement break if that's what they need.
Yeah.
And it's giving control back in a way where we're able to give that person an opportunity to set their own boundaries. Where am I comfortable? Where do I sit? Where do I stand in this particular environment? How does it make my body feel? If I feel safe enough, I have enough tolerance to stand or sit and learn for the expected amount of time. But if you take away my control, I'm now starting to feel overwhelmed and agitated. And I'm going to act in such a way to change my environment to find my balance again. And all of that is misinterpreted. And that's just in one little kind of example.
And Keri, what a valuable message that is for oneself. In other words, when just thinking about me and my experience in the workplace, to attend to, I'm not suggesting I'm neurodivergent, but to attend to the same, let's say, framework of self-understanding so that I can work optimally.
Yeah.
For instance, I'm sure you can associate with this. There are some people who don't like to stay behind the nurse's station or the counter, and they like to constantly be moving. And um, there are other people who are reticent to come out from behind the counter. We have to attend to both of those situations differently.
Yeah.
And each person has let's say, a responsibility to own their own, what they're aware of. And oh my goodness, there's a landscaper right outside our office here, so you might hear a leaf blower. Um, uh, we have to, in that grid in the beginning, what are you in control of and what are you aware of? Can we get into quadrant one with all of
Yeah.
it? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of this, is the battle for control. Who is in control? Why do we need to be in control of every single situation? What is it like to feel free? What is it like to feel that there's no expectation and I can just be who I am and move freely if I need to? And when we think about regulation, once that regulation need is met, and we do meet it discreetly, we see that engagement often improves after that. And autonomy is a huge part of that, particularly, I will say, Andy,
Yes.
from a very young age, from a very, very young age, autonomy is key in regards to kind of support and making our children, our loved ones feel comfortable.
Keri, the three attributes of meaningful employment experience beyond money, more
Yeah,
important than money, is mastery, autonomy, and purpose.
there we
Isn't
go.
that something?
There we go.
Yeah.
And purpose is everything, particularly in health and social care. What is your purpose to firstly go into a job where you may need to support vulnerable adults and vulnerable individuals? Andy spoke about well-being. Part of that is sometimes because what gives our life meaning is feeling good that we have helped someone else. And what a better place to be in than be in a job that you love, you're feeling that you're actually make a difference. And at the end of the day, you feel good about yourself. And that kind of links into all of that. Now, when we talk about validation or invalidation, when emotional responses are discouraged, when they're dismissed or even minimized, we often assume that that person's distress will go away, but it doesn't. It intensifies. Maybe on some occasion, not externally, but specifically for the person, it will intensify internally. And, I'm sure all of our listeners will be aware that we've all experienced a heightened situation and we've been told, just calm down. Have you ever been calm? Stop overreacting. We've all been met with phrases like that, or why are you acting like that? It's not really a big deal. And that communicates that a person's internal experience, it's not valid. It's not acceptable. Marsha Lynam's work, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Marsha Lynam's work.
She's 30 miles from me, and
Wow.
I've sent a number of doctors to her for training over the
Very
years.
good.
And
Well,
we're very fond of DBT here.
yeah, so a lot of her work on invalidation, it helps us really to understand this much more clearly. And in invalidating environments, people learn that their emotions are wrong, they are excessive, or they're unacceptable. And that increases emotional arousal. It makes it harder for that person to regulate and to navigate their kind of feelings really safely. For autistic individuals in particular, and others who already experience heightened kind of sensory and emotional intensity, repeated invalidation, we know can be extremely harmful, because when emotions are kind of not met, they're not acknowledged, they're not supported, that person's distress will escalate. And we do come into this very negative mental health space. And that's where we can start to see some really risky behaviors start to intensify. And that's where we kind of talk about those behaviors that are harmful to the person. We have self-injury,
yes.
of course. Yeah.
This quote is so powerful. You're speaking right into it.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
please continue.
So when we talk about self-injury, self-injury itself may emerge as a way to regulate overwhelming feelings. So a little bit like our box at the start, for that person, it might actually be very, very controlled, and that person is very aware of it at the start. It may be used in a way to promote regulation and that overwhelming feeling, or just to communicate that something is seriously wrong. And from a low arousal perspective, validating emotion does not mean agreeing with behavior. It does not mean, we are escalating demands. It means that we're recognizing the feeling underneath the behavior, and we're responding with that calm, attuned support. Yeah. And when distress, is met with validation and safety, rather than you shouldn't do that and we're correcting it, or it's met with that pressure to stop expressing yourself the way you should, we know that arousal rises. And as Marsha Lynham kind of emphasizes, lower emotional arousal creates those conditions where healthier coping strategies can become possible. And you mentioned before, Andy, that's in our windows of tolerance. Yeah, that's where we can educate each other in that space. That's where we can have a deeper understanding. And we do kind of, we're in that present moment, and we are very aware of the conversations that we're having and the impact that our actions can have. So I kind of want to wind down a little bit, thinking about system responsibility, thinking about our direct support. And behavior itself, the way in which we move, and behavior differences, these emerge within systems. We can all agree on that, whether it's in family systems and networks, whether it's in schools, whether it's in care environments, policies within those environments, the expectations that we place in that person, and also the emotional climate created by the adults in that system of support. And a whole system of support, a whole system approach, it asks us to look, as you very nicely kind of put together, holistically, but beyond the individual child or beyond the person that we are supporting. And we do need to consider the environment and how that might be contributing to distress.
It's so related. It's all so connected.
Yeah.
And we talk about it in isolation every day. Yeah. And it's so ridiculous that we're doing that, because it's because it's not real. It's not real that this is happening in isolation. It's impacting other parts of your being human, of your human experience. It's impacting other parts, and we can't treat it in isolation either.
Yeah. No, absolutely not. And a lot of the time, particularly within, if I'm going out and I'm supporting maybe larger services or skill settings, we talked earlier on about the negativity in the space that we hold at the minute. And there's so much negativity on educational system. There's headlines on health services, and there is so much, extraordinarily overbearing pressure and expectation on professionals that we are afraid sometimes to be really candid. We're afraid sometimes to be human.
Yeah.
Because we hold a professional stance.
Yeah. We don't take our own medicine, as Andy said.
As Andy said, we're really bad at taking our own medicine. Yeah. And system responsibility, it's not about blame. It's about recognizing the pressure within a system and how it affects everybody, including the children and adults supporting them. And we know that when staff are overwhelmed or unsupported, that arousal increases, but it increases across the whole system. And responses can be more reactive, more controlling, and more rushed, not about slowing down at all. So low arousal and the approaches really recognize that supporting staff regulation is the safeguarding. And it's not an individual skill, but it's a shared way of working. And it relies on that consistent team. It relies on the consistency of understanding and support, not just, as I say, for those that we support, but our colleagues as well. And we know, of course, that in moments of distress, the focus is simple. It's calm, we give space, and it's acceptance in that moment that there are things we can influence and there are things we can't. And rather than trying to fix or correct behavior, supporters then learn to prioritize reducing their own arousal, both spoken and non-spoken. Yeah. And it's not about doing nothing. A lot of the time I hear, oh, low arousal is no arousal. And it's, really trying to, and it's not about that at all. It's not about doing nothing. It's a deliberate, this is where we are aware, we are in control. It is a deliberate choice to prioritize safety and regulation.
Yes.
And reflection, you talked a lot about reflection with Andy. Reflection, problem solving and skill building as a team, that all happens later on, not in the moment of crisis.
Yeah, exactly.
Once we get that person to feel safe and regulated.
Yeah.
Getting the timing right, I guess, is one of the most important skills in low arousal practice.
When I think about, I feel like I've been to a well-being clinic with you over the past hour and 15 minutes. I think one way of conceptualizing everything that you have been describing is that it is ideal for us to be in quadrant 1 and to help someone else get to quadrant 1.
Yeah. Quadrant 2 is okay. That's where we're comfortable. That's where we also feel safe and we're allowed to be authentic in our space. And that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Quadrant 1 and 2. Yeah. Quadrant 3 and 4. We just need a little bit of a better understanding maybe, or a clearer understanding of why we get to that stage and how we can come back. Yeah. And again, we're not waiting on a professor of psychology and human services who hasn't been born yet to do his doctorate and his master's to come back and tell us all how to do it right. This is a real humanistic, common sense approach to life and living
more. Yeah,
an experience that we all play. So I want to just end, Andy, on a little bit of what your conversation gave way to with Andy McDonnell. And this is about our well-being, because we all have a part to play. And we're very aware that good well-being is more than good health. Our children, whether you're a parent, whether you're a professional working with individuals who need that additional support, those are the ones invariably being supported by a large network of people. And it only takes one crucial part of that network to be stressed for the whole system to crumble. So we need to look at that flow throughout the system of support around the person. In practice, within family homes, whether that's within a children's home setting or a residential setting or a hospital setting, the support can initially be really fixated on risk assessment. And look, I put my hand up. I wholeheartedly understand why, because we are under a microscope as professionals. I get that.
Yeah.
Right? We are scrutinized for every mishap or every near miss. And this is partially maybe why we aren't so candid, with the real things that happen and the real stress.
Oh, it's exactly why we're not. You put your finger right on the pulse of that problem. Are the nexus to the legal issues that we have absolutely have conditioned people to not be forthcoming.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really focused. We're focused on the risk. And what we're actually focused on more often than not is the person looking good or seeming happy, right? And the focus on well-being itself, it often comes after the fact, but it should be in the here and now, because we do not often consider the role as one we play as supporters than being unhelpful. But when we create that kind of lower stress in the service, when we really focus on, okay, what are that person's stress triggers? Why is that a trigger? How does that movement help that person in the moment? Yeah, particularly when we think about really risky behaviors, as I said, as self-injury. So when we create maybe lower stress services for individuals who self-injure, we might need to keep a lid on happiness, because happiness itself can be really overwhelming at times, okay, on an emotional level.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Yes.
It's this idea of I want you to be less stressed, not more happy, because the more happy will come after the person is less stressed.
Yes.
So,
Let's
yeah,
not manufacture the happiness. Right. Exactly.
yeah. And we can't truly be completely absorbed in something or enthused in something if I'm really stressed. Like, there's no point in me having an absolute, horrendous, stressful week at home or at work, and then on a Friday night going out to see my favorite band, because I'm going to be sitting in the seat being like, I'm so stressed, I really can't enjoy this. It's a whole body experience. So we need to be less stressed before we can really become happy. And once we're less stressed, then we can actually have the energy to focus on the things that are important to us. So movement itself, is very meaningful. Low arousal approaches, they give us ideas about what is causing the stress. We talk about movement not as a problem to be fixed, but actually can be a really good regulator for a person. We know that environments of support matter. And I guess changing us as supporters, often changes outcomes faster than trying to change the child or person we are supporting at the moment. And what I will say is, and I am very, very candid in this, low arousal does not promise quick fixes. Okay, I always say this to people coming on, particularly, our some of our shorter courses. You're not going to come onto this course and learn, take away 10 tick box skills and you'll never have a behavior distress ever again. Yeah. That's not how it works. Yeah. But what it does promise, and I do make this promise to my families who come for support, we promise fewer crises. We promise less harm, and we promise more dignity. And the goal isn't for me to make people happy. It's me to give you that piece of understanding in a safe, unjudgmental place where you are able to be consciously aware and in control of the reflection that we have and figuring out the path to make that child or individual I'm supporting less stress. And when stress reduces, safety increases, and we get fewer crises.
Oh,
and that's
my gosh.
Really good with that.
So lovely. I could not agree more. Keri, I've taken your PowerPoint off the stage and I've brought you back.
Thank you.
If you want to come over. What an incredible presentation, and by such an incredible person. And I want to thank you so much for how you have articulated some of these principles in very accessible ways for our people. And I really hope that what you have presented here today helps people reduce their own stress and helps them reframe what it is that they're looking at that they might be crediting with their stress, and that they're willing to learn more about what they can do to support people. I've always felt very in debt to the great Greg Smith from Pennsylvania, who has been saying for 35 years, the journey is moving towards support and away from control. In all areas we can move towards support and away from control, we make the world a better place, because we're all supporting quadrant 1 and 2 when we do that in the low arousal approach. Keri, where can people learn more about your work and low arousal if they want to follow up with you?
Yeah, that would be great. So we are on socials, which is great. We're on Facebook, Instagram at Studio 3. And they can pop over to our website, www.studio3.org, or email info@studio3.co.uk, and that will send you straight to some of our training team. And maybe I'll see you someday in the future. It would be great. Yeah,
wonderful. Keri, thank you so very much for your presence in the world, for how you show up in the world today, and for your willingness to make what you have come to understand available to others to be of service. It's been a beautiful 90 minutes together, and I look forward when I come to England to meeting you in person.
It will be a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.